After a harrowing ordeal that brings him dangerously close to death, a hard-partying alcoholic experiences a profound awakening. Lucille, a crippled man, navigates the streets of New Orleans in his wheelchair to find his friend Melvin. As he asks the locals if they've seen him, a documentary team that's curious about the alleged rumors about Melvin follows him around. After a while, Lucille finally finds his friend passed out by a dumpster. Irritated, he tells Melvin to get up, reminding him that he needs to be in court. His ex-wife has filed a restraining order against him and wants to gain full custody of their young son, Rex. Melvin isn't about to let that happen, so he immediately hops on his feet to get moving. He quickly ties Lucille's wheelchair to his bike and pedals home. Upon arriving, he helps his friend up the ramps despite the man's protests. Shortly after, Melvin tidies himself up and runs through his short speech, explaining that he didn't abduct his son but only wanted to go on a holiday with him. He also promises to do better as a father if given the opportunity. Before he leaves, his mother Eileen and his sister Clarice wish him luck. Then, with the help of their close friend Lyle, Melvin and Lucille head to the courthouse. However, the odds are against Melvin, and though he was merely given a community service order, he's now lost his chance of ever spending time with Rex. Infuriated, he speaks with his ex-wife Doreen as soon as she exits the building, telling her that their son will hate her for this. However, she answers that she doesn't want her son to be part of his dysfunctional life. Helpless, Melvin can only wave goodbye to Rex as Doreen drives away. Later that day, Melvin drowns his sorrows away by getting intoxicated at a party. As he enjoys this brief euphoria, he also flirts with multiple women to distract himself from his problems. Meanwhile, the documentary team interviews Lucille about his and Melvin's relationship. He shares that he was part of the Gulf War, wherein he got shot by a sniper, leading to his condition. His wife was so ashamed of his situation that she abandoned him when he got home. Luckily, Eileen and Melvin helped him until he got his life together, and since then, he and Melvin were inseparable. Back at the party, the man jumps from an elevated spot, aiming to land in an inflatable pool. However, instead of hitting the target, he ends up falling to the ground. Miraculously, he stands back up, unscathed, without sustaining any injuries. Shortly after, Lucas, Melvin's childhood friend and science teacher at the local community college, arrives at the party. In a previous interview with the documentary team, Lucas disclosed that Melvin possesses telekinetic abilities. He had also conducted a study on Melvin's brain and discovered a few irregularities, but overall, he appears to be normal. However, the teacher is bothered that his friend is squandering his extraordinary potential when he could make a significant impact on both his own life and the world at large. For the following days, the troubled man tries to occupy himself with random activities to keep his mind off Rex. He goes to church and sings with the local elderly, and he also spends time with his friends. On some occasions, he uses his telekinetic abilities as a side hustle. With Lyle as the hype man, Melvin elevates Lucille's wheelchair in front of a crowd. Amazed, the people express their amazement by giving them cash. Later that day, the gifted man goes home and immerses himself in music by playing the piano. However, Eileen tells him to put down the furniture that he elevated earlier. Concerned about what troubles him, she asks if he's feeling okay, and her son responds that he's fine. Elsewhere, Gladys, Melvin's churchmate, gets interviewed by the documentary team. She shares that she's been living in their neighborhood for 35 years, but she's been by herself for as long as she can remember. One time, a strong hurricane blew her roof away, and Melvin led her to safety. When the storm passed, she was surprised to see that her roof was back on her house, and she assumed that the telekinetic man did it for her. Later that day, the documentary team interviews Melvin. He reads them one of his favorite books, unconsciously showing his profound taste for literature. She also shares that his mother happens to be a writer, and he wishes he were as eloquent as her. The following day, Danny, one of the gifted man's close friends that's currently in jail, talks about the first time he witnessed his telekinetic abilities. He was incredibly impressed, which eventually brought him closer to Melvin and the rest of the group. Elsewhere, Melvin, Lyle, and Lucille meet up with Nathan, a local thug who sells hash. The three are civil around him because he's the only dealer in town, but they actually despise him and his gang. As soon as they get what they need, they immediately leave. On their way back, they pass by a roadside memorial dedicated to a teenage boy who was allegedly shot by Nathan after he failed to keep his end of a deal. Later that night, the three have the time of their lives while intoxicated at a party. However, when the fun dies down, the troubled man remembers all of his problems. The following day, he fulfills his tasks for community service, where he gets paired up with a teenage boy who set his school on fire. However, instead of doing their job, they spend the rest of the day smoking illegal substances. Later that day, Melvin shares every precious memory he has of Rex. He claims that he'll never abandon his son the way his father did to him. In the following days, the man's life goes into shambles as he indulges in his vices. His day is either composed of getting drunk and high or stalking Rex. Later on, he goes to Lucas to help him with his research on his telekinetic abilities. The teacher points out his friend's tired appearance and advises him to get some rest before things worsen. He also opens up the possibility of working with other experts to further understand Melvin's abilities, but the man refuses. Later that day, while Lucille answers a crossword puzzle, Melvin guesses the correct answers without even looking at the clues. Suddenly, Jimmy, a cop, stops by to check on them. He then goes on to say that the telekinetic man's abilities are wasted on vices, when he could use it to create a better community for his son. Annoyed, Melvin replies that he'll get his life together and that he just needs time. Ironically, he spends the afternoon finding trouble with Lyle, chasing robbers, flipping the criminal's car, and stealing their loot. That night, he goes clubbing as usual and does the same thing over and over for the next couple of days. However, one fateful night, he suddenly collapses in the middle of a party. He immediately gets admitted to the hospital, where he soon wakes up and learns that he went into cardiac arrest. The doctor is quite surprised that he has no medical records despite having several scars from gunshot wounds. The doctor tries asking him for an explanation, but Melvin only dishes out sarcastic replies. Offended, the doctor bluntly tells him that he died for several minutes, reiterating that it isn't a joking matter. He then concludes their discussion by informing the man that he needs to stay under observation for at least 48 hours. With his near-death experience, Melvin realizes the value of life. He admits to Lucille that he wasted tons of opportunities, and that he was being stupid. He now vows to use his gift for the greater good, such as fighting crime, instead of creating it. Determined, he even promises to get sober. The next day, the man willingly goes to Lucas to train how to harness his telekinetic abilities. He also drinks the macrobiotic juice that Lucille made for him, because his friend claims it'll cleanse his system. For the next couple of days, the documentary team records Melvin's journey into sobriety and becoming a better person. However, despite being able to steer away from his vices, he still can't help but observe Rex from afar as the boy goes to school every morning. One afternoon, the gifted man accompanies Lucille by the side of the road, where a woman named Yolanda usually passes by. Lucille has always fancied her, and that afternoon, he'll finally strike up a conversation. True enough, Yolanda passes by and the man shoots his shot. He asks the woman if he can call her if he impresses her, which surprises Yolanda. Suddenly, he pretends to levitate his bag, but it's actually Melvin doing all the work. This impresses the lady, and Lucille successfully earns her number. That night, the two learn that Danny's finally out of jail, so they head to his house to celebrate. Although Danny expected the two friends to party with him, he respects their decision to remain sober. Days later, the man discreetly follows his son after school. Eventually, he witnesses the boy walking home with a schoolmate whose father is part of Nathan's gang. Worried that this might put Rex at risk, Melvin meets up with Jimmy, claiming that he's been sober for a while and that he wants to help the community. Suddenly, Nathan passes by and casually curses at them. The cop then shares that he's one of the town's biggest threats, but the telekinetic man reassures him that he'll do what he can to help. Before confronting Nathan and his gang, Melvin goes to Lucas's lab to practice his abilities. However, he barely misses the teacher with a metal stop sign, causing Lucas to conclude that he isn't ready. Despite this, the determined man marches straight into Nathan's base, commanding his gang to bring their leader out. One of the men warns him to leave, threatening him with a knife. However, Melvin stands firm and tells him to take a shot, but as soon as the blade flies toward him, he stops it with his telekinesis. Alarmed, the men back away. He informs them that he's ready to face their boss anytime, anywhere. He then disses them for hurting kids and leaves. When Melvin comes home that afternoon, he sits down with his family and Clarice's new boyfriend, Ryan. However, he jokingly threatens to break the man's jaw if he hurts his sister. Clarice gets annoyed and they end up bickering. To annoy her further, Melvin levitates the object on the table, which causes the frightened guest to run out of the house in a panic. Eileen reprimands her son for his behavior, but his attention suddenly shifts when he receives an urgent text regarding Lucille. He quickly heads to the hospital, where he learns that Nathan shot his friend because of the stunt he pulled. Lyle and Danny then tell Melvin to leave because he's putting all of them at risk. He doesn't want to go, but he ultimately leaves when Lucille shuns him away. Feeling abandoned, the troubled man basks in his sadness, which causes everything around him to break or levitate. He then drowns himself in alcohol and later goes to the local bar to have some more. There, Jimmy sees him and he's surprised to see that Melvin's broken his vow of sobriety. Days later, the man gets drunk and heads to Lucille's place, asking him for forgiveness. When his friend turns him away, he heads to Danny's place and asks to hang out. Lyle, who happens to be there, doesn't want him around, but when he sees that the man brought some goodies, they welcome him inside. The three men then spend the night consuming illegal substances and later invite some women over. Melvin makes the most out of the situation, so he makes out and sleeps with them. The morning after, the three men walk to the store to buy some alcohol. However, they get caught off guard when Nathan's gang suddenly starts shooting at them. Luckily, Melvin is quick to use his abilities to block the bullets from causing any harm. Despite escaping unscathed, he feels his chest tighten, so he tells Lyle and Danny to take him to Lucas. The teacher is unsure of the underlying issue and suggests that the telekinetic man consult with a specialist. However, Melvin stubbornly believes that all he requires is rest. Unexpectedly, Lucille enters the laboratory, having heard about the situation. He then holds his friend's hand and reconciles with him. Later, Melvin comes home and Eileen expresses her concerns about his well-being. He then calls her over for a quick embrace, reassuring her that everything's going to be alright. The following day, the gifted man does his usual routine wherein he watches his son from afar. However, his heart breaks after seeing his son being picked up by another man, whom he assumes is Doreen's boyfriend. As he performs community service later that day, he decides to resume honing his telekinetic skills with Lucille. He meets with him that afternoon, showcasing his precise movements by remodeling a car with some spare parts found in the junkyard. Then he meets up with Jimmy, informing him that he's about to put an end to Nathan's deeds. He emphasizes that it'll be rowdy at the C block, where he expects to execute his plan. Despite Jimmy's offer to help, Melvin asserts that he'll do it alone. Later on, he heads to the gang's territory, and the documentary team accompanies him. Finally, Melvin arrives at the C block, and as predicted, two of Nathan's men are parked outside a store. With his telekinesis, he opens up their trunk and levitates bundles of money and a shotgun. The men immediately panic, but they scream at the telekinetic man to come out and face them. However, he only uses his abilities to send the men flying. Soon, he barges into Nathan's spot, where he greets the men by hurling a collection of discarded cars in their direction. In response, they retaliate by firing bullets at him. Remarkably, Melvin promptly intercepts the bullets using a sizable piece of metal, effectively using it as an improvised shield. He proceeds to swiftly overpower and subdue each of the men until all that's left is Nathan. As he chases the gang leader all over the vicinity, he destroys the entire building. Soon after, he delivers a severe and unforgettable lesson to Nathan, effectively putting an end to his menacing actions and ensuring that he and his gang are permanently driven out of town. The next day, Melvin and Lucille spend time together, leisurely strolling through the neighborhood. During their conversation, Lucille expresses his desire for a new set of prosthetic legs, to which his friend playfully adds that he wouldn't mind a new wheelchair either. However, Lucille counters, saying that he's re-signed to his worn-out wheelchair for life because he simply can't afford a new one. To his surprise, Melvin leads him to their usual hangout spot in the junkyard. There, the telekinetic man presents him with a new chrome and white leather wheelchair, specially customized with the letter L on it. After touring Lucille around town with his new gift, he bravely approaches Doreen despite the risk of violating the restraining order. He asks to see Rex, saying that he's lonely and he misses him. However, Doreen points out his audacity to feel this way when he stopped helping with child support. The man corrects her, taking out a piece of paper proving that he's been putting money in a bank account to provide for his son. He hands her the paper, claiming that he put $4,000 in their son's name and that there's more coming. Once again, he pleads with his ex-wife to let him walk Rex from school, even for one last time. When she finally agrees, Melvin hurries home and changes into a suit, then eagerly waits outside the school gates for his son. He then takes the boy on a bike ride, cherishing their precious moment together.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.